So, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice came out last month on March 22nd, 2019, and let's just say that shadows have died way more than twice. The game is said to be absolutely brutal by many players' accounts, and while it retains much of the DNA from Bloodborne and the Souls series, it's different enough that even veterans had to readapt in order to play the game effectively. Now, over the last few days, Sekiro has sparked a debate about difficulty modes and accessibility in video games. It all began with an article by website Forbes titled, "Sekiro Shadows Die Twice needs to respect its players and add an easy mode." The editor expressed that games like Sekiro not having difficulty settings means that only certain types of players with the time, inclination, reaction speed, and lack of physical issues will be able to beat the game, and how this is a problem. With Sekiro specifically, he cited a lack of co-op features present in Souls and Bloodborne that helped mitigate some of the difficulty before discussing how a lack of easy mode is disrespectful to players, stating, quote, "There's a lot of talk about respecting the player when it comes to not including an easy mode, an idea that all players can and should play this game in this particular punishing way, and yet I think the lack of an easy mode showcases the exact opposite. It shows an almost stunning lack of respect for players with the idea that they cannot be trusted with their own gameplay experience, that even those who want a challenging game would somehow be lured by the siren song of lower difficulties and destroy their own experience because they're too impatient or immature to know what they actually want. The summoning system is a perfect example of this. I never used it once while playing Bloodborne because I knew what experience I wanted. I didn't get as into Dark Souls 3, and so I used it liberally." The article then highlighted Celeste as a game with accessibility features that gave players the option to fine-tune their gameplay experience while preserving a core standard mode before expressing dissent over From Software fans' aggressive insistence that the existence of an easy mode compromises the experience. So here's my take on the matter. First of all, there is a clear distinction to be made between easy mode and accessibility options. Easy mode implies stuff like enemies doing less damage and the player character doing more damage, attack patterns being more forgiving, players getting stronger faster, so on and so forth. Accessibility options imply stuff like being able to change your key bindings, adding compatibility for a wide variety of input hardware and methods, options like colorblind mode, and anything that will make physically playing the game more convenient. Now, while Forbes' article does bring up accessibility, much of it does focus on how Sekiro needs an easy mode, so that's what I'll be focusing on. With that in mind, on one hand, if developers do decide to add an easy mode, I agree that nothing's really lost as long as that's completely optional. Hardcore players can stick to the standard or higher difficulty game modes, while those who may not have the time, skill, or ability can play something more comfortable to them. On the other hand, if a developer decides that their game has no place for easy mode, I would argue that this is well within their prerogative. I wholeheartedly disagree with labeling developers who have a very specific vision for their game and who want zero deviation by implementing easy mode as being disrespectful towards players. It's one thing to say I would have preferred an easy mode, and it's a whole other thing to say developers disrespected me by not adding an easy mode. It's one thing to prefer an easy mode, and it's another thing to demand it without consideration of the creator's intent. This goes doubly true for From Software games, which became popular because they're so shamelessly merciless in how punishing they are. The fact that there is no way to seek respite from the brutality of From Software worlds is a core part of the studio and their game's identity. It's what makes their worlds feel so harrowing. It's in large part what establishes the atmosphere, the sense of knowing that you're in for a world of despair where parameters for your journey cannot be adjusted. In a world of despair, you cannot wish that something were a certain way, that certain things were easier. You have to deal with the cards you were dealt and overcome them, and that's a big part of From Software games' appeal. You can't seek shelter in some easy mode. You are given the tools and means that are given to you, and you either accept that and struggle your way through the despair, or you die trying. Yes, this type of experience is not for everyone, but it's not meant to be, just like how the challenge of climbing Mount Everest isn't meant for everyone. One could argue that adding a cable railway that much more easily takes you directly to the top wouldn't affect those who want to mountain climb Mount Everest the hard way, that the railway would allow more people to experience the thrill of reaching the top. But what makes reaching the top of Mount Everest such a special experience is that it's an incredibly difficult feat, one that few people can achieve. Similarly, part of what makes From Software games so special and what gives them such a unique identity is that only those with the will to persevere, struggle, and learn from their mistakes can reach the peak of the mountain, so to speak. Obviously, beating a From Software game isn't nearly as hard or as dangerous as climbing Mount Everest. I'm just trying to make the point that From Software games being so hard to overcome compared to many other games is what goads and dares players to take on the challenge and what makes beating it so rewarding. I don't think From Software creates games like Sekiro, Bloodborne, or Souls thinking they're meant to be conquered by everyone. I think the whole point is that only those with a certain proclivity and determination can overcome it. The developers are probably well aware that a lot of people may put the game down after just a few hours, that a significant portion of the gaming population may not reach the end, and they're perfectly fine with that. That may very well be the whole point, for better or for worse, which is why I completely respect their decision to not include an easy mode or cheat codes, to not give players any wiggle room for the struggles they must overcome, and to commit to merciless worlds that does not give a damn about your preferences and your wishes. You're either made for this or you're not. You either deal with your situation or you give up trying. That's From Software's design. These are the kinds of worlds and games they make, and that's hardly being disrespectful, that's simply being uncompromising in the very specific type of experience they're building. As for accessibility options, not to be confused with easy mode, I'm all for stuff that actually give people the opportunity to tackle the challenges a game presents. I'm all for stuff like the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which allows hardware input to be thoroughly personalized so that disabled people, for example, can physically play the game. And look, if individual developers want to add features like an optional accessibility mode where a lot of stuff is automated, if they think that kind of thing fits their own game, that's perfectly fine. But From Software's decision to be ironclad about their game's design and intent is something I can also respect. Now, following Forbes' article, the Sekiro debate sparked once more when website PC Gamer published the following article with the headline, "I beat Sekiro's final boss with cheats, and I feel fine." In it, the editor detailed how he used the slowdown mod tool to beat the final boss specifically. For those who don't know, Sekiro's final boss is notorious for basically demanding unflinching, long-term concentration and near flawless split-second execution. Some players have been able to overcome this, but others have expressed that this type of struggle, where it's less about adapting and more about making zero mistakes for long stretches of time, is exhausting and not particularly fun, which is why this article's author decided to use the slowdown mod tool, which allowed him to beat this boss he wasn't having fun with, and at the end of the day, he had a lot of fun with the final boss with this tool. He felt he still got an adrenal high and sense of accomplishment, and he felt nothing was truly lost. Now, certain crowds didn't take very kindly to this article, with this Twitter post in particular having gained a lot of traction, which reads, quote, "You cheated not only the game but yourself. You didn't grow, you didn't improve, you took a shortcut and gained nothing. You experienced a hollow victory. Nothing was risked and nothing was gained. It's sad that you don't know the difference." Now, I for one think that these sentiments are rather dramatic. In fact, people have already turned this into a meme. My stance is that similarly to how one shouldn't demand developers to implement stuff like easy mode, one shouldn't dictate the experience players should get out of their games. The beauty of stuff like PC modding is that you can shape your gameplay experience however you want. It's a liberty that an open platform like PC can afford, and I'd never want that to be taken away or dictated. Sure, some might argue that people who use the slowdown tool didn't play the game as the developers intended, that the artistic intent of the game was sidestepped, but players are more than free to make their own decisions as long as that doesn't affect other people's experience. If a player wants to go out of their way to mod and personalize their game sessions into something more desirable and suitable to their preferences, I say why not let them? It's also not as if the PC Gamer editor cheated their way through the entire game. This is a tool that was employed only when fighting the final boss after long stretches of unfulfilling trial and error. Now, shortly after the PC Gamer article stoked the flames of this Sekiro debate again, a number of developers began to voice their opinions about accessibility in video games. God of War developer Cory Barlog has been especially vocal about this discussion, with his first tweet on the matter stating, quote, "Accessibility has never and will never be a compromise to my vision." He also added this in a follow-up tweet, "To me, accessibility does not exist in contradistinction to anyone's creative vision, but rather it is an essential aspect of any experience you wish to be enjoyed by the greatest number of humans as possible." In regards to Sekiro and From Software games in general, Cory had this to say, "Something can be both difficult and have a good suite of accessibility features. I believe, my take after only one conversation with him, Miyazaki's games are about creating a strong meaning and weight to everything you find, not being difficult for the sake of being difficult." Cory also emphasized that he believes there's a difference between making a game easy versus making a game accessible, while supporting the idea that developers should ultimately make their own decisions on what they want to put in their games, and expressing that he doesn't believe From Software would be against adding accessibility features. He was also adamant about the fact that he's not throwing shade at From Software for their decisions or anything, that he's simply expressing his personal views on how accessibility does not compromise vision. I don't disagree as long as accessibility options are implemented in a way that fits. For example, JP Kellums, former creative producer of Platinum Games, talked about Bayonetta's accessibility options with the following statement: "Having a one-button mode, easy automatic, in Bayonetta didn't make getting pure Platinum any easier. It didn't ruin your experience. It did make myself and others on the team receive many comments from new Bayonetta fans who could have never otherwise enjoyed the game." It's true that the easy automatic mode didn't ruin the experience of those who played Bayonetta normally, and I totally support developers who choose to add this stuff as an option, so long as developers who choose not to do so because it doesn't suit their particular design aren't admonished, especially when we're dealing with From Software games' particularities. With a game like Bayonetta, it's all about that power fantasy, so a feature like easy automatic mode is more suitable, whereas with From Software games, such a feature would mar that looming sense of being at the bottom of the food chain in a savage world. If you can just hold down a button and overcome challenges that way, sure, it's more accessible, but can you really say the player is having the true Sekiro, Bloodborne, or Souls experience at that point? Again, not to be confused with stuff like Xbox Adaptive Controller, which affects nothing about the game, but allows people to overcome physical disadvantages and experience a version of the game with its core integrity intact. I'm more referring to features that genuinely affect a game's design for the sake of accessibility. Stuff like Bayonetta's easy automatic mode, and stuff like what Matt Thorson, designer of Celeste, is proposing in the following tweet. "If Sekiro had a Celeste-style assist mode, combat speed 50 to 100%, set game speed while enemies are aggroed, resurrections +1 or infinite, invisible while sneaking, infinite posture, invincible while drinking gourd or always. Important elements of assist modes for hard games in my opinion, activated only from the main menu, per save file, so it's invisible to people playing without it, has a clear explanation of what it is up front. Once active, you can adjust assist options at will during gameplay." I'll echo what I said before, nothing wrong with thinking about stuff like this, as long as you don't go around demanding them and claiming developers not doing it your way constitutes being disrespectful or doing something wrong, which Matt isn't doing, but that Forbes article did. If From Software feels like adding features like these would somehow diminish the core game, then we should respect their decision to not implement them. Now, if a player decides to mod their game to their liking and whatnot, they can go right ahead and do that. I don't think they should be admonished, but there is nothing wrong with the base product preserving developers' envisioned design. Finally, I'd like to highlight this tweet by game developer Rami Ismail, who linked to a video showing a man playing Celeste with voice commands to highlight how making the game accessible with things like additional input methods doesn't equate to making the game easier. This I completely agree with, and it harkens back to the point I've made about the difference between Xbox Adaptive Controller versus a full-on easy automatic mode. It's one thing to encourage developers to allow as many input options to make it as physically possible to play the game. It's another thing to demand that developers implement a mode that tweaks fundamental aspects of gameplay in a way that doesn't suit it and may change its overall identity. So, to make a long story short, I don't believe there's anything wrong with optional easy modes and gameplay affecting accessibility features, but there's nothing wrong with a developer deciding easy mode just doesn't belong in their game either, especially with special cases like From Software games where overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges is a major part of their identity. I have nothing against Bayonetta's optional easy automatic mode. I have nothing against Mario Kart's optional assist mode that keeps you from falling off stage or crashing. I certainly have nothing against difficulty options. I think it's wonderful when games find workarounds for disabilities and whatnot. But I also have nothing against a strictly designed game which developers decided should be played with very specific parameters. I'm essentially all for whatever individual developers think best services the ultimate goal and design of their game, and sometimes that could mean giving players more options to tweak their experience right out of the box, and in other circumstances, it could mean restricting those options to evoke something very specific and tailor-made. And the beautiful thing about video games is that there's something out there for everyone, and part of that is that not every experience has to be for everyone. These are one man's thoughts and opinions on the Sekiro debate anyway. I'd love to hear what your stance is on the matter in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.